refugees stories are never been told. And I wish that the best way to help people understand things is to create video games so that the young people can be able to understand how to resolve conflict, or they can be able to be part of somebody's life as they're playing it.
Today, our guest is Lual Mayan. Lual was born in a South Sudanese refugee camp in 1993. 2 years later, Lual and his family moved to the neighboring country of Uganda to a more stable and safer refugee camp. It was there that he was first introduced to computers and went on to develop his first video game. Today, Lual is the CEO of Junub Games. Mayan has received several awards, including the Global Gaming Citizen Prize at the 2018 Game Awards and the 2020 CNN Champions for Change. In 2021, he was honored at the Young Activist Summit in Geneva, Switzerland, for his outstanding achievement. Lual, thank you so much for joining us on Undaunted, man. It's good to see you.
Lual, right now you're based in Washington, D.C. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
But we know that you started your life in a vastly different way. And we want you to talk about it a little bit with us. And just to kind of set the scene in the background here for our listeners, for Masood and I, in 1993, your parents flee South Sudan during the war. And this is a war, for those of us that don't know, lasted decades, saw the displacement of 2.5 million people, resulted in a famine that left people on the brink and the verge of hundreds of thousands of people on the brink and verge of starvation. And of course, we saw the highest number of civilian deaths in this war since World War II. And this is the beginning of your story. Could you explain to us what it was like being born within that pain and that trauma and that loss, and how has it shaped your reality and the person that you are?
That's a very good question. As human, we always have different stages of life, and it depends on each of us and individually, and where you grew up, where you were born, and what country you're from, and what are some of the circumstances are. And for my family, this is a two ways answer. The thing that I've learned, and the thing that how it felt like for me as a child growing up in that environment. It wasn't easy. First of all, sometimes when I have conversation with my mother, my father, who actually experience what it is to be in that war, for me to then be born on the way as my family was fleeing the country. A lot of people think that, refugees are people who just, maybe wake up in the morning and leave what they love. For them, they had a family. For them, they had a country that they call home. And because of the war, it was a journey of, of life and death, where you have to decide whether you're going to be there or find a different home that you can. And I remember having a conversation with my mother, for her to for them to flee the whole, the country, working in the bush, and no food, no medication, no water, like this. No, it was just like a very hard journey for them. And for her by herself, being also pregnant on the way and giving birth, it wasn't easy for them. So, even for me, as a child, when I was born, nobody actually knew that I was going to be alive, because I had no food. I have no, there was not anything at all. But, life is always like that. You are destined to something, sometime. It doesn't matter where you are. And, when I had a chat with my mother, and she was just telling me her experience, because I didn't know by that time. I was just still like a kid. And for her, giving birth on the way, it was the most difficult thing. It was really very difficult for somebody to flee a country that more than 250 miles, and they had no idea where they're going. Whether they're going to Uganda, whether they're ending up within South Sudan as internally displaced people. It was just so hard. Even in South Sudan itself, there was no place where they can be able to settle. It was everywhere. The country was messed up. Everybody you didn't even know where your sisters are. You didn't know where your family is. You didn't know it was just and that's why my dad had to use a different route. And for me, being born on the way, and she was not the only woman actually that gave birth on the way. There were others, and some of them, could throw their children away because they didn't want them to suffer. It was just this whole dark space in human life that just comes, that whether you're gonna go through it or not. And finally we were able to like resettle in Uganda, and that's where like I become who I am. Yeah. So that's the first part of it. That experience was just like nobody deserve it, in the world. And I wish we live in a world where people really understand and have empathy, and instead of like teaching it, all those things are always happening. I'm not the only person. There are more than 1,000 or 10,000 Lual that are also like in that same space. There are more than 2.5 refugees around the world. There's refugees everywhere. Others are displaced by famine, others are displaced by war, others are, political issues. Like everybody has a different thing that they go through. And that's why it's really very important to share stories like this, because they kind of help us. There's the third part of it is like, what have I learned from this, from these experiences? I've learned a lot of things. First of all, like when I was in a refugee camp, we had nothing to do. Like the only thing we do as kids is wake up in the morning, go and play football. Like I mean soccer, because they were like, there's no any other thing that you could do. There's no good healthcare. There's no good. There was no food. We wait like once in a month, for the United Nations to bring like food for you every month. And that's what we rely on. Like you have a family of 5 people, and you're only getting like 25 kilogram of like a maize flour, and that's what you're waiting for like a month, and that's how you sustain yourself. Other people would actually be more creative and do other hand work, go laying brick, and then you sell them. It was just this. Even raining, sometimes it can rain and you don't have a house, you only have like a tent that you're sleeping on. And a lot of people think that living in a refugee camp is like it's a temporary thing. No, people are born there. People have been there for like 23, 24 years of my life. People like been there for 50 years. Like it's become a home for other people because you were displaced from the only place that you know. The children, all my brothers were born there. Everybody like, everybody like it become part of their life. And that helped me a lot to understand, to think about, okay, this is my home. It doesn't matter whether I have resources or not. This is all I know. So I'm going to try to figure out what I can do with it. Talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. There are like people in a refugee camp, they live in, they actually build their own houses, even if it's not a very good house, but they are like engineers, like all those small things kind of like help me a lot to just think about, hey, this is where I'm going to live. This is my home. There is nothing that I expect better than this. So it gave me a mindset of like, okay, let me try to create a change here by myself, in order to be able to like keep going. And and I learn a lot from my mother. I learn a lot from my family. Like even if we live in a refugee camp, there's that learning, because you go to a refugee camp, there are no like no school, no better school. There's no like, it's so hard. Even learning English, for you to speak English is so hard, So I had to also like explore all those things and teach myself. So like it was just this level of like human experience that can help me to be able to think about, okay, I can use my experiences, my past, my difficulties to create a sustainable future for other people. And that's really what I learned from it. And also being grateful, I think so. Like, a lot of people might ask me like, oh, why did you have that different kind of mindset in a refugee? We're kids, we're together every time. But I was doing something different. But for me, I think I learned about like three things, and that's like being comfortable, being happy with what I had. I remember like, I had to like take a step ahead without knowing anything to ask my mother for a computer. And that was crazy idea. You wouldn't even think about that as a kid. First of all, there's no money, there's no place where you're going to like charge the computer, who's going to teach you how to use it, like all those things at the same time. But I didn't care about them. I knew that there's somebody that can believe in me. So like as we keep on this conversation, I can mention more. But there's that mindset of me that I didn't care whether I have resources or not. I had to be comfortable. I was happy every day. Like those experiences kind of like helped me to be who I am today, and also to create what I'm creating today. It was because of my experience. So and I think that's why it's really very good for creators to use their own experience to create things that they love. Because and that's why, like, yeah, who then is going to create this experience if it wasn't a refugee or if it wasn't someone that experienced it? And that's why, like, it's really very important. And yeah, yeah.
That's an amazing, amazing, amazing
Mm,
story. And I'm thinking about you talked about talent
mm,
being pretty evenly distributed across the human family, right? Talent can
mm,
come from anywhere, right?
mm.
And here you are in this refugee camp in Uganda. You discover computers. Well, I'm thinking about like when I was 4 years old and I first discovered drawing. And for me, that was an amazing, amazing experience. It was like, wow, I can actually put marks on paper and it actually,
Mm,
people like what I do,
exactly.
I for me, it was also seeing a way kind of out of my circumstance and my
Mm.
situation. So I'm thinking about for you and being in that refugee camp, coming across computers, video games. What was that moment like? When did the light bulb go off for you? Right? When
Yeah.
did you realize that there was a deep connection between you and this technology, and you wanted to utilize that technology to amplify your voice?
Well, that's yeah. I like how you asked that question. It's really very good because I think again, as I talked before, like about like talent, right? Like there is this experience you need to have, or this time of life someone need to have in order to actually go for something that they want, right? For example, like I didn't just wake up in the morning and thought about, hey, I need computers, like because there has to be that part. So I think that I remember asking my mother when I asked her for the computer, to go back was just like when I was a kid, it was just more than just like I was really very creative. A lot of people know that when I was in refugee camp. So first of all is I would make like film, like I would create movies characters using cartoon like a box, and then I would make my own film out of box. So by 8 p.m. Kids will come to my house and they will watch movies like that I created for almost like 1 hour. My mom started realizing that, wow, like you're really good. Everybody in the refugee camp was like, oh wow, this is really
Mm.
good. And then from there in 2007, there was a refugee registration. So they were using computers now to register refugees. So I came and I'm like, wow, what is that? We're in a line. I was like, what is that? Then my mother was like, that's a computer. I'm like, how did you even know it's a computer? Like she has never been to school. She has never seen computer before. And I'm like, how did you even know? And we're just standing on a line so that they call us and register us, like so we get food and all those things. 3 years later, I think it was 3 years later, I came to her and I was like, yeah, mom, I need to buy a computer. And she was like, what? Like, where are we going to get the money and all those things? But, because she was a mother, she knew what I could do with it, with all those small, small
Mm.
creative things kind of accumulate in order for her to at least see there was like a credit. And then, and then from there was a risk for me because I had my brothers. I have my two brothers, I have my sisters, and I'm like, it took my mother 3 years looking for $300 to buy for me my first computer. And I remember came to me, she was like, hey, here's the money to go and buy a computer. And by that time, it really changed my life in two ways. First of all, I'm like, no, this was not a good idea to ask. Second, that I was really excited, right? So one, the reason why I say it was not a good idea was just now the reality was hitting now. I have the computer. She works through 3 years so hard to get for me to get $300. Second to that, it's gonna be hard for me to find a place to charge it. No internet. Nobody's gonna help me to um, learn how to use it. The worst part of it was if I don't use it, my brothers one day will come back to mom and say, "Hey, I need this." And then she was like, "Oh no, like I worked so hard and I bought Lual a computer, so and he didn't use it." So it's like yeah,
So
I'm
you
setting it.
felt a lot of pressure.
Yeah, a lot of pressure and all those things. So like I'm like, wow. And then I had to do research. I found a place. It's a UN center whereby it was 3 hours per day to go and work to find a charger. So I found it and I would work there every day to charge my laptop, come back. I'm working there. Sometime it's raining. And then like it would be raining on my backpack. So I would like it was just so crazy. And then just, learning how to use like, Microsoft and all those small things like by myself. And then one day I went to the internet cafe, and then my friend installed for me a video game called Grand Theft Auto. on my computer. So I came back home and then I opened the computer, and the first thing was an icon I saw, and I'm like, wow, what kind of icon is this? I never seen it. So I opened it, and then the thing is like Grand Theft Auto. And I'm like, wow, like, what is this? Like, it's a video game. I never thought like video game are made by people. I thought they just fall from heaven. Like, I had no idea at all. So I started like, exploring it, playing it. And I'm like, wow, like games are really so powerful. And that's a time where I was like, wow, like I want to start
Hmm.
making games. Yeah.
Well, I want to even backtrack a little bit
Yeah.
because you spoke about your mom. Could you speak to us just even briefly about the role that your mother played in your life and in your ambitions?
Well, that's yeah. I think that's I've done a lot of interview and nobody has ever asked me that question. I mean, yes, I know that's actually coming from my mother as well. I think the biggest role that I think my mother has I learned a lot from my mother is like, as human we're not just destined to achieve something, and that's why like sometimes it's okay, like, of course, like you can dream or sometimes you can, but execution is very important, right? Sometimes we want something to achieve, but if you cannot execute it, if you don't have the people, the right resources around you, you won't succeed, right? And when I look at that, that means that those people play a big role in your life in two things. We are all human, like sometimes we feel like nothing is going to work out. But that's why we are human. That's why we need people around us, not to help us, advise us, not to give up. Even
Mm,
for me, like it, I wouldn't say it was just this amazing journey or like this crazy journey whereby I never thought of like, oh no, I don't care. Like I've had those moments. You know, and those moments are actually what defined my mother, because every single day I feel like just a human that I cannot achieve anything or I cannot be able to do anything. My mom's come up because she already
mm,
have those experiences. Going back, I remember like, my family, myself, I've been in refugee camp for 23 years. My family, 25. And within those 25 years, so we have something called refugee resettlement. So even if the refugees settle in Uganda, they can also apply for resettlement to like maybe Canada, Australia, other part of the world, so that they can begin a new life. So and most of the time, it's like the program is like a lottery, like, yeah, you can be resettled to the US, or like I've seen a lot of friends in a refugee camp who were living in. We applied for them. We applied for that. My family have applied for 10 times in 20 years, right? And we are rejected for no reason, right? Not at all. And then I'm like, oh, what is going on? Maybe like, I'm destined to just be here. And then in 2017, when I made my first game and my game went viral, and then I got invited to San Francisco and give a talk at a game developers conference. This was February 2017. And like I was excited. I'm like, yeah, finally, like the curse has been broken now. Like at least I'm not applying for some refugees resettlement. Now it's because of my skills. So I'm going to America. Like I'm not just going there to stay there. I'm
right.
going there like to give a talk about my thing that I'm doing in a refugee camp, and then come back. I was excited, like, tears in my eyes. I was really I was really happy. And then I woke up in the morning 2 days later. There was a Trump refugee trouble ban. This is now the 11th time, 11th time to be denied in like 21 years, right?
Mm,
So I'm like, what is going on? So I came back home, and I threw my computer down. I was crying. I was happy, like before, like one day later on, somebody just make a policy to ban refugees to come here, and that affected me as a refugee who did not just apply for resettlement. I came here with the knowledge, right? I threw my computer down, and I told my mom I'm giving up. I'm not doing anything because I'm not seeing, because I'm a human. I want to see the result of what I'm working on. I can't just be there. Like I want to see the result. So if there's no result, then what's the point, right? my mother looked at me, and this is a moment that defined me, and that's actually a moment that I think about her every single day.
Mm.
She looked at me and she was like, Lual, what's going on? And I told her, and she was like, let me tell you something. And I'm like, what are you telling me? And she was like, do you know that you cannot steal water from an ocean? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you actually mean? And she was like, yeah, you cannot take a basket, a big basket, go to an ocean and withdraw water from it. It keep on overflowing, and that's how you are. Pick up your computer. I'm like, what? And then that moment changed my life. I pick up my computer. 2 months later, I got my permanent trip to come to America. And that moment, if I had given up, I wouldn't have that opportunity. And she was like, no, you can't steal water from an ocean because that's who you are as a person. There's more to come. You keep going, keep doing what you love. And those moments will always determine. And I think that every single time my mom's come in, she just like try to help me understand life. You know what I'm saying? So like those are the things that I learned. And 2 years later, they are in Canada now. You know what I'm saying? So
Never let you give up.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
So, Lawal, as you were talking about your mom and the, amazing role that she played in your life and how at that critical moment, she kind of kept you moving on the path that you're now on when you kind of wanted to give up. And as you were talking, I was so interested in, the game that you designed. You talked about playing Grand Theft Auto, which has a
Yeah.
very particular kind of narrative. I mean, it's I've seen advertisements for it. I know people that play it.
Yeah.
And it's so different than the game that you designed.
Video games are incredible. Like they're very good tool of entertainment. When I first played them, and I said before, like I didn't know that people create video game. I thought they fall from heaven. So there's one thing I always tell people: if I did not play Grand Theft Auto, I'm not sure if I was gonna have the motivation to create games. By playing that game, it kind of like gave me the idea of two things: to understand what the industry is and to understand how games are actually related to people, right? So, and that moment when I was playing Grand Theft Auto for the first time, I felt like it was engaging me with the characters. I felt like, there was like a change of behavior, like few things that just occur around when I was just playing the game. And by that, I was like, oh, wow, like games can be used for telling stories. They are really very powerful tools that we can actually tell stories. That was the first thing that came into my mind. And I'm like, I'm from a country whereby 73% of the population are under the age of 30. They're all young people. They were born in war. They were raised up in war. I was just having this, thought in myself. We were born in war. Growing up in a refugee camp, all they know every day is like the best way to solve a problem is war,
Wow.
right? Or is violence. And by that time, I'm like, okay, in a refugee camp, like not now, like in a refugee camp, how about I create a game that can help kids in a refugee camp to understand, peace building, to understand all those narrative I was thinking about in the refugee camp. And I'm like, oh wow, these games are really very powerful because like they can be able to engage people. I remember like playing a game with my friend, actually with my manager, Chris, and then I kill his character. And you know how he reacted to me? He didn't say, "Yo, like, why did you kill my character?" He was like, "Why did you kill me?" It became like part of him. He like, this character is mine. This character is part of me. I'm playing the role here. And that moment was just like moment that was like, wow, you know, refugees stories are never been told. And I wish that the best way to help people understand things is to create video games so that the young people can be able to understand how to resolve conflict, or they can be able to be part of somebody's life as they're playing it. So my game that I'm working on, Salaam, which is actually coming up soon, I've been working on it for a couple of years now. It's a game that put a player in the shoes of a refugee for players to understand, yeah, we are making impact as well. Second to that, it kind of like how people, as we talked about before, we talk about policy making. My target is more than just now. We talk about empathy building, people to understand. We have a lot of people that make policies on refugees and they really don't know what they go through. They just make them because they feel like, oh, yeah, they're just refugees, but they don't know really the thing that they go through. So in 20 years, somebody who is like maybe 15-year-old right now, maybe playing my game, and one day they're going to be in the position of power, and then they might actually make policies that can actually help refugees, and they understand what they really go through. So it's helping players to understand really exactly what do these refugees go through, and that's why like games are really about a very powerful medium that we can be able to tell all these stories.
That's incredible. So you're essentially taking video games, which for many people is this purely entertainment
Mm,
driven medium,
mm,
device, tool, mechanism, whatever. But you're actually, this time,
mm,
you're using it for conflict resolution. You're
mm,
using it for empathy building, to have people understand
mm.
what life might be like
Ye-
living in those
yeah.
circumstances that you were living in.
Yes, because like games are like, yeah, games are really that powerful that way. In terms of like decision making is really very important, right? Like this, before like we have this kind of game that we have, amazing games that for storytelling, right? But then there's this space whereby you have to understand what these stories are. You have to understand it's not just even just for refugees, also for like climate change. Games are really very powerful for those things. Like and all those things are really very important in terms of like, and when we put it in an entertainment way, people are enjoying it. It's not like, oh, like I'm playing a game about a refugee. No, like, the video game industry is an industry, is a community of people who love what they want to play. So like people can choose what they want to play and they play it and become part of them. And I think that that's why we need to really like, engage on all these things. That's why we have people called activists. The other ways we can use that medium to reach more people.
We actually want to bring up the fact that you won this in 2017,
Mm,
the Global Gaming Citizen Award. What does the
mm,
idea of being a world citizen
mm.
mean to you?
That's really a very good. That's a very good question. Like, so when I came here, and my focus was to build something that I love, something that I'm chained to it, right? Something that I feel like I started from one place, which is in a refugee camp, but this product can it's for everybody, as you say. Like it's we are all global citizens. We face the same challenges. We face a lot of things that that anybody, if somebody comes up, they can be able to like solve them. When I was named the global gaming citizen, to me I felt like I was creating something new in the game industry, something that is a global industry. Billions of people play games, and over the years, there's no category whereby we can be able to use game for good. All those things, and for them to create that category and recognize me with that, it was really it gave me so much hope in a way that yeah, you know the global industry also understand that these games are really also very powerful. These games that is more than just activists. Games that can be able to tell stories, and I feel like that's how it's supposed to be, even in the movie industry. When you open an app for you to watch a movie, you have category like comedies, you have category like action movies, you have things like families, dramas. All those things are there, but they are under one. And that's how I want the game industry to be. It's not just the AA game, like like maybe big other games. Also, like independent designers can be able to make it there. And I feel like for independent designers around the world that want to create their own things. Not only are they creating it for themselves, but also they're creating for global industry. And I think and that gave me so much hope, you know. And that's why, again, diversity and inclusion is very important. So I created something based on my experience,
Mm.
and I need the world also to to recognize it. So if I cannot create what belonged to me, that's like part of me. I'm bringing something new in that industry, and that's why like it's more than just my game. It's more than just diversity. It's about like, yeah, we need this. It's not just a norm. It's not just something that we just bring in the industry, because we know how big the game industry is, and people like me I feel like I'm also welcome into the industry. And I think that it's very good, and that kind of helped me to keep building and become who I am today, and also help other people that are coming, that are looking after me and say, oh yeah, I'm not I can be recognized as well in this industry, and then we create more, bring
Wow.
more people, and I think that that kind of helped me a lot. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Well, I know for Nav and I both, this whole idea of being part of this kind of global consciousness, we see ourselves not separate and apart from everyone else, but interconnected, is so very important to us. So I really identify with you kind of approaching, you really centering that consciousness in your life and in your work and your practice and what you do, which is, we need more of that, and it's so interesting because I was thinking about, as I've been listening to your story and, blown away by all of the things that you've overcome, you had me thinking about, a song by the rapper Tupac Shakur. Are you familiar with Tupac Shakur?
Yeah.
Well, he's got a song, man, and one of the lines in the song says that black roses grow from concrete. And I think about everything that you've overcome and how you represent a rose growing through challenges and adversity and difficult circumstances. And how people that come out of those circumstances, those people that we often overlook, can often make the greatest contributions to society.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate, it's more than just kind word, but coming from you, it's something that keep me going. Interacting with people, and I've watched some of your work. I've seen some of this incredible thing that you're doing, and and that we can't say anything. That's why you guys came up with something like this in order to help. For me, what's next? I want to keep building. I believe a lot in growth, and that's the most important thing, for me to keep building my company, keep building my game. And I started, I launched my foundation recently, 2 years ago. And, and that's something that I'm really also passionate about. I remember during the pandemic, I was coming back from is it San Jose. I had a visit there, and I came back home, and I sat down. I couldn't go to work, and I just sat down at home, and then started working at home, and I getting paid, but I'm working from home, and I'm like, 2 years ago, or that was that was in 2020. I was like 2 3 years ago. Where would I be right now? Would I have the opportunity to sit in my house and use my computer to work on internet? I was like, oh, no, I wouldn't. But now I can because I have the resources. What about if somebody is in a refugee camp, has an internet and a computer and all the skills, they can work for any company. You know what I'm saying? And that's where we're like, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. And by that time, I pick up my call, talk with my folks, and I started a program in Uganda where I'm teaching kids game design, animation, and 3D development. And a lot of companies like Unity Technologies came through, and now I think next month we're beginning our first residential program where kids can come to the school and stay there for 6 months for free and learn programming. And I think that I think that's something I want. You know, you need to believe in people and those young people in a refugee camp. Technology is more than just a dream to them. It's something that is going to change their life. Or resources are not just something for them for today. It's something that is going to change their life, their family, and it's all start with me. It changed one life. I came here, more than 5 lives later on. My family is in Canada, and I think that those are things that I really want to achieve. Keep giving back. There are more people like me in a refugee camp. Out of 2.5 million refugees, for me to become a game designer is nothing too special. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm here to tell the world refugees can become anything. They can become entrepreneur. They can. I'm like a voice to them. I'm an activist for them to say they can become entrepreneur. They're not a burden to the society. They're not here to do anything. They just need opportunities. So, with that being said, I'm really happy that I keep on growing to understand life and also to understand more about things that I care about. When it comes to refugees, there's a lot of challenges going on, right? And so many ways people can be part of that, right? And there's a lot of organization people can be of support to that. And I think that with me, when it comes to if I meet the most powerful person today, in the world, and just say, hey, what should I do for refugees? I only have one thing I would ask, and that is like education is very important for them, right? What are the ways can we do to be able to like give them resources so that they can learn and also understand and improve their future, right? And I think that's the most important thing is if we see organizations that are supporting refugees in terms of like giving them resources, that is amazing. If you know refugees in the states, it's a very like I'm telling you, like it's for you to give them advice is actually the most important thing because they resettle here, they begin a new life, and it's hard in this country. It's very very like it's very hard. Even there are people that are in the pursuit of succeeding, but they don't find the right people that kind of devise them. And that's another way of actually helping refugees in the diaspora. Refugees that are here, they come here, and then it's the whole. I remember when I came here, I didn't know anybody. I had to live in Airbnb for like 6 months, right? And there's that community building. It's so hard, right? Like I live in a big apartment in DC for like 4 years now, and I even don't know who is my neighbor, right? Like so like there's that community building. It's kind of like so hard. So like those are best way to like help refugees around here and just helping them, giving them a device to them, giving them the resources is the most important thing. For me as an entrepreneur, like another way, I'm in a space right now where we are, raising, capital for my company. So if there are ways, connecting with different people, I'm down. I can always do the presentation. But yeah, it's the best way to keep growing. Yeah.
Lual, we just
Yeah.
add a final thought and just a final question here. There is one thing that I'm noticing throughout the storytelling of your life, a tool that you have picked up time and time again that I know that Masood can relate to, that I can relate to, and many of our listeners can relate to, that even in your darkest hours, you've had faith. That in your most difficult moments, you have had hope. Whether it was how you were treated as a refugee in the camps, whether it was how you were treated as an immigrant when you came to America, you still had faith and you still had hope. Why? And where did that come from?
Hope, faith are really a really very important part of my life. And it came from experiences that I had. First of all, I wouldn't have the opportunity to have hope if there wasn't somebody that had hope in me, or if there wasn't somebody that had faith in me. I wouldn't have had that. Why? Because I wouldn't even have the opportunity, to be here today. So I think that came from experiences. Being resilient is very important. I would say tenacity is really it's a really very big part of this because like there's this family that was together from the beginning, that was built by one person or two people. That's my family, and I think my family is a very big like inspiration to me. And over the years, I start like developing my own things by myself, my own belief, my own, like, of course, like I learn a lot from my mom, I learn a lot from my family, I learn a lot from other people. But now it's also my part as a person to be able to like have those things, because if it's worse for me, then it's going to be worse for those that come after me, right? And that's why it's really very important for me to use my voice to advocate for people that are coming after me, or to be able to use all the resources, because that's the most important thing. And I'm doing all these things in the name of hope and faith. If I don't have them, I'm not going to go anywhere.
We're excited to see you out in the world and creating these mind-blowing video games. And Masood and I are here cheering you on.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lual, man. Thank you for being on the show,
Thank you.
man. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you, most of all, for your hope and your faith. We need it.